Hello, folks. This is George Saramuga, and I have Richard Sherman, my cola, a friend. And we're going to talk to you here today on Thursday, May 28th is when this is going to show. But this is actually a week prior on the Ascension, May 21st. And so we're going to start with a smudge with some sage. I'm going to light this. And Richard is a enrolled member of the Oglala Lakota tribe in southwestern South Dakota, and has a lot of traditional views and thoughts. And we're just going to talk about Richard's life, and we're going to bring the pipe and the Bible together. And there's room for both. And so we're just going to talk here in front of the fireplace without the fire, because it's kind of warm outside. And so all what we're doing is to glorify our Creator. And so that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to light this sage. And what we call this is some smudging here. And so, okay. And Richard, tell us, our audience, the significance of smudging.
There are two things that you use. There's the sage itself, and then there's the sweetgrass. And and the purpose of the smudging with the sage is to drive away the bad spirits.
Okay.
And the sweetgrass will bring in the good spirits.
Okay.
So,
Okay. You know, folks, it's a beautiful culture. We do a lot of smudging at our facility, our healthcare facility, as well as at our church. And so that's a beautiful tradition that the Lakota people have. And I'd like to we start here with a prayer, and this is out of Whispers of the Lakota. And this was written by a 10th grader at the Red Cloud Indian School down on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And his name is Catlin. It's peace-defying. It holds no violence. That's why I follow it in silence. It is the red road. Peace and harmony is what it shows. Kanku, luta, some might say. Strong and bold is how you play. Look into yourself, that's how you find it. Do good for the people. Don't let evil blind it. Look into Jesus' eyes. Walk with his pride. At the end, when you take flight, you're guaranteed a spot in paradise. This is beautiful, a beautiful poem out of the Whispers of the Lakota. Richard, you grew up on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and talking today as we got out and looked at some medicinal plants that you're teaching me about. You know, one of 8 children, one of the middle child, and ended up being the hunter and gatherer for the family. Can you just share some of your upbringing on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, your reflections?
well, as a tribe, we're basically hunter-gatherers. But I really didn't know what I was until the Germans told me that
Okay.
I was a typical hunter-gatherer.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time hunting and gathering food and medicinal plants and so forth. So
I see.
in the course of my life, I'm 77 now. I learned a lot about plants. So now I'm teaching other people, people who have never experienced
Sure.
living out in the wild, and about the kinds of plants that can be used. And it's in a day like, well, the way things are in the world now, you can never tell if your economy will fail or not. And if it does, you need to have the skills to get out there and know, how to live a subsistence life again.
You bet.
And and we're really not that far removed from when we did all of our subsistence gathering and hunting out there. So.
Would you consider your upbringing, and were you healthier back then with the hunting, gathering, and what you ate versus today?
Well, yeah, we were constantly on the move, so we had things to do. Like for myself, for instance, I had to carry water by hand,
Sure.
2 buckets at a time. I hunted, usually first thing in the morning when I got up, before it even started getting light.
Mm-hmm.
I would go out and I chopped wood, and the girls worked around the house,
Right.
and to upkeep and so forth. So people were never heavy back then. They
Right.
you know, they were healthy. The land was very healthy. It was, and now it's so overutilized. There's so much overgrazing and such going on that there's when they pull the cattle off the range in late summer, then there's neither cover nor feed for wildlife. You know,
Sure.
and, so that just isn't factored into the management system being used today.
Right. And you mentioned, you know, that hunting gathering at a young age kind of swayed you into going into that for a career in terms of like a wildlife biologist. But before that, talk a little bit about your experience at the boarding school and then going into the Navy.
Yeah, well, there were only two high schools on the reservation at that time. One was Holy Rosary Mission School, and the other was Ogallala Community High School in Pine Ridge. And they were only 4 miles apart, the two of them. And so when I finished grade school, then they sent me there to OCHS, it was called. And but I was always very unhappy with it, and I ran away a lot. And eventually, when I completed the 10th grade, then I just quit school,
Okay.
and eventually I joined the Navy.
And they promised you the Navy's not just a job, it's an adventure, right?
There were plenty of adventures for sure.
And so with the Navy, what kind of trade did you learn while you were in the Navy?
I really didn't learn a trade. I
Okay.
was because I hadn't completed my high school
Okay,
at that time, so I had to do that when I was in the Navy.
okay,
And then, but I also took some college courses. So when I got out of the Navy, I went into college, and I started out as a sophomore in college.
wow,
So I went from one to the other.
nice.
But by taking a lot of tests, I found out that if you took a lot of tests to show how much you actually knew,
Right.
then you could they could be converted to college hours.
And you were in the Navy from 1961 to 65, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you went to Utah State for undergraduate
Yeah.
and got wildlife biology degree?
Mhm.
All right. And tell us what you did with that when you came back to the reservation.
Well, see, I always knew that because I was a hunter-gatherer, that I wanted to give something back.
Sure.
I wanted to do something for wildlife and the plants and so forth. So I started there, and that's where I studied wildlife management. And then when I got back to with the tribe, I got a job as executive director of, it was called Ogallala Sioux Parks and Recreation.
Okay.
That was the organization that was responsible for the fisheries, the wildlife,
Sure.
the buffalo, the ranger program. And then we had what's called Cedar Pass Lodge out in the Badlands.
Mm-hmm.
It's a restaurant and a gift shop and cabins.
Mm-hmm.
And so I operated that for the tribe for a number of years.
I see.
And then later on, I became a wildlife biologist. Excuse me. And I worked at that for 10 years for the tribe. So,
I see.
and they didn't have a means of inventorying their wildlife at that time, and we were always getting chided for like the Badlands National Park and the state. They say, well, you don't have, you know, many deer on the land here.
Right.
It's practically nil in some areas. So after I did the first inventory, I had them crunch the numbers, and there were more deer per square mile than the adjacent state managed area.
Wow.
So we never heard any more about that.
Tell us the importance of buffalo to the Lakota people.
Well, it's as important as it ever is. I mean, they still use them. It's still a central figure in the sun dances.
Right.
People still feel the closeness to them, I
Sure.
guess. I mean, they were a part of everything. I mean, their food, their religion, the clothing.
Right.
You know, and so.
How about the story you were telling me before we were eating about your friend?
But anyway, there was this young a teenage girl. I would go out to get a buffalo for her mother, a Sundance buffalo, which I did every year. And she would get up on the hill and sing them in. She would sing Sundance songs, which is what she knew. And then I didn't realize what she was singing until she told me later. But they would come in every time. And then I would shoot the buffalo that they would use for the Sundance, and as I was working on it, the others would gather around within just a few feet, just
I
curious.
see.
They were never a threat or anything, or they didn't
Okay.
consider us a threat, but so they allowed us to take one of them, you know.
Sure,
So,
sure.
and then prayers are usually said by a medicine man
Okay.
or someone,
Okay.
and we do smudging there out there on the prairie, and
Okay.
so it's a sacred ritual. It's
Sure,
fun, yeah.
sure. And when you talk about the spirituality, how would you define your spirituality today?
Well, I believe that everything in the world is connected,
Mhm.
and we're not apart ever, and so I feel connected to the person on the other side of the world. So we have to respect others. We're taught to be what's called ikche wichasha, which is a common man, or ikche wia for the women.
Okay,
And you never put yourself above anyone else.
sure.
So you're honest with them, and you're dealing with them, and you respect everybody. And
It's interesting you bring that up because I was told there's no word for inferior or superior in Lakota.
well, that I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was told. Getting back to,
Yeah.
you know, was it Medaki Yosen?
Yeah.
We're all related.
It's kakayasi, yeah.
Okay, we're all related. And so, and that's beautiful, you know, and me doing some traveling to Nepal and the Philippines, and you really realize that medicine wheel, you know, the four colors of the universe, and all people are
Yeah.
connected and related, to your point.
So when, I guess an illustration of this would be when Black Elk was up in the clouds, looking down, he said, I saw in a sacred manner, and what I saw was the sacred hoop of all of the peoples of the world, and they were all connected into one. And so he was saying the same thing that I just said, that we are literally all connected, and so we're not apart at all.
You know, and in Crazy Horse's seventh generation prophecy, where all people come together under the sacred tree of life,
Yeah.
led by the Red Nation, and we're living in that seventh generation now. So very sacred out here in the Black Hills and in this part of the country, and so it's just you can just feel the energy, you know, certainly up in the Black Hills.
Yeah, the Lakota are very spiritual people. I mean, they actually live with their spirits. They often you eat at someone's place, they'll set out a plate of food for the spirits.
Right.
They'll just set it outside. You know, the dog may eat it or something, but you put it out there for the
right,
spirits.
no, yes,
And
yes.
so that's a common thing that you might see. And sometimes when we're gathering plants, people will set out tobacco, and it's like respecting or
Sure.
permission almost.
I've been with Native people that have done that,
Yeah,
to
So-
honor and as you say, respect.
yeah. So a lot of people carry tobacco with them to do that, you know, whenever they're collecting. And this is about the time of the year that the plants are all starting to get to the point where you can harvest them, like the timchila, the wild turnip.
Right.
That's coming up right now.
Right.
It's almost half grown from what I can see, but you have to be careful. The first ones are nice and tender, nice and young, but if the seeds aren't formed, then you know, you may do the plant damage, and if you take too many of them from an area before the seeds form, then you may destroy the population in that particular area.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, and as part of the beautiful culture is, I've been blessed to work with the Lakota for a couple decades now, and believing that we're all responsible for our health,
Yeah.
and all life and healing comes from the Great Spirit. And so it's a beautiful culture that resonates with a lot of people,
Yeah.
and 90% of our physical, mental, and emotional problems relate to our spirit. And that comes from the Lakota people. And that's how I feel as a non-native,
Yeah.
to further my belief how we are all related.
Mhm.
We're all one in Christ Jesus, you know, one way of saying it, or the Lakota phrase.
Yeah.
Medaki Yosen, or
Yeah. Mitakoyasi.
okay.
All my relatives.
All my relatives.
Yeah.
And so how powerful that is is when we all come together, that, the mind, body, spirit, and as one people.
Yeah.
And so, you had a couple, what I call Godcidences, where, you felt the Spirit was there to protect you or to help you. Could you share a few of those with us, Richard, please?
Well, I live alone now, and I think because of my boarding school days, I'm prone to depression.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard to get out of bed if you're feeling depressed about something.
Mm-hmm.
And every morning, about around 8 o'clock or so, a woman's voice would wake me up. And then, or sometimes, at some point, after it happened several times, the woman came to me in a dream and said, "I'm somewhere else now." And then after that, the noise that woke me up was an elk bugling,
Wow.
or maybe even an alarm on a clock, or somebody slamming a door, and I live alone, so
Right.
This wasn't really happening. It's
Sure.
just,
Sure.
and so right about the same time, so that I would get out of bed and I wouldn't,
Sure.
waste every day away just laying in bed and sleeping. And in Canada, they treat their boarding school students, the ones who suffered in their boarding schools, as though they had PTSD, and that's how they treat them. We didn't get that here. We didn't have that treatment, so I just had to suffer through it myself. But I know other people who have attended boarding school, and they get together. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous.
Sure, a support group.
And they talk about their experiences, and they cry. They cry,
Sure.
and it makes them feel better.
Sure.
Until the next time. And so that's still happening now. And so they could probably use help, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I just dealt with it myself, and so probably ruined some of my relationships. But there you have it.
Well, Richard, each day is a new beginning.
Yeah.
And how about the $20 bill?
Yeah, I was just, I had to go into town. I was on the reservation to do something. I can't remember what it was, but I stopped at a place called Sharp's Store, which is a prominent place on the reservation, on the way from here to there. And as I was leaving, I looked down, and in the mud, there was something that looked suspicious. I picked it up, and I unfolded it, cleaned it off. It was a $20 bill. And I went in town, got my business done, filled up my gas tank. It was exactly $20. And so I paid him, and I went back home. And so things like that happen to me all the time. And so it makes you believe that, there really are spirits that are watching over you.
Right.
And
Right.
so.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Is there anything else we talked a little bit about as we were out walking and looking at plants and stuff, maybe some, the Lakota values, the code of ethics, and growing up. How was that instilled in you as a kid, as a youth, growing up? Was it role modeled by your parents or the community, or?
Some of both, I guess, and we had people who were more sacred in the way they did things than others. We had a lot of alcoholism on the reservation and some really awful ways of living, and so you just had to pick and choose who your role models were. And my father, as I mentioned earlier, he succumbed to the grape, and he drank from then on throughout his life. And so mother was the real strong. She was her anchor, I guess.
Sure.
And so she became both parents, really, actually. And then and she was a teacher, and she taught in almost every school on the reservation, plus the tribal college.
Wow.
At different times. And so some of the elder people that I know now, I talk to them and they say, "Well, I was just a little kid and your mom taught me," and they mention how good a teacher she was.
Sure.
It kind of makes you believe that you touch a lot of lives in your life. So if you're doing good things, those things will spread to others and to others and others. And if you do bad things, it's the same thing.
Sure.
And so she touched a lot of lives, and who knows how far-reaching that is. But
I don't think we'll know till we get to the spirit world.
Yeah, probably.
Of all the people that maybe it was just a smile, a handshake, a pat on the back
Mm-hmm.
that helped that person get through that day.
Yeah. Well, I was in a store waiting to get waited on. I just had a couple of things I wanted to pay for, and behind me was a little girl and her dad. And I reached in my pocket to pull some money out. Well, $3 fell on the floor, and I did not. And she said, "Mister, you dropped some money." And she picked it up, handed it to me. And so I gave it to her, and I said, "That's for being honest."
Yes.
So I think that those sort of things that the children will probably remember, and she'll pass that on to someone else.
And we talked about, Richard, how I look at the 12 Lakota virtues and the code of ethics that the Lakota have as, for me as a non-native, as fruits of the Holy Spirit. How they're all very, very, very similar. Being kind and loving and forgiving and compassionate and truthful, honest, the things that we're talking about. And rewarding that behavior like the little girl. And what can we do to help you right now in terms of some of the PTSD, some of the depression, some of the things you're going through from your upbringing, especially the boarding school time? What can we do as a society? What can I do as a brother?
Yeah. Well, yeah, as for myself, I can deal with it myself. It's not a problem for me. And I mentioned to you before that to me, to my way of thinking, that
That's true.
And we did every day. I mean, my dog and I were out there wandering around all the time and fishing and hunting and
Right.
catching spiders or whatever you did,
Tell about the cricket story with the shower.
Oh, okay. When I was living between Manderson and Wounded Knee, before I'd go to work, I would shower, but when I turn on the spigot, then little crickets would fall out, little baby ones, and if I didn't pull them out of the water, they would die. So I would pull them out and I'd put them on the floor, and they'd stagger around for a while, but they'd live, and then I'd take my shower. Well, I think I got a payback at some time in my life. Every morning I would get up and run on deer trails. I'd go up through the timber out on a prairie, and I do it in the morning when it was cool because the snakes weren't out yet. And but one day I had a meeting in Pine Ridge, and I had to run late, and so as I did, I ran. I was going up through the timber trail. Cricket came down and stopped right in front of me, and I would have had to step on it in order to, if I continued walking,
Right.
or running rather. And about 5 steps ahead, there was a rattlesnake right on the trail, coiled. And I didn't see it, and I probably would have walked right into it, or run right into it. And so it really...
Being protected.
Yeah.
Being
and
protected.
so possibly what I was doing for the young ones,
All life is sacred.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, and the fact that cricket might know what I did, there's a way of communicating that we're not really aware of.
Sure.
And even Black Elk mentioned it. He said that not all people can do it, but some do. And he said when he was out hunting and people were starving, and a coyote came to him, and he said they spoke in a way that was as clear as a spoken word, or clearer than a spoken word. And the coyote told him where there were 5 buffalo. So he went over there, and he got all the buffalo. They were in deep snow, and
Right.
and he got some people from the village to have to take back to the village, and it saved them. And so things like that happen. And but another time I was hunting, and it was on a November day. It was cold. There was patches of snow on the ground, and I got skunked. I mean, I didn't find any deer at all. And then I saw these crickets moving down below me, which seemed odd to me on a cold day like that. They would be out in the open. They were oriented both in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over there to a small canyon, and there were 2 deer there, and yeah.
Pointing the way.
Yeah.
Pointing the way for it. And you mentioned, and we had a nice discussion at dinner about black elk in terms of bringing the pipe and the Bible together.
Yeah.
What is your reflections on black elk in terms of his role as a mystic, medicine man, healer?
Well, he might not really have been known as to, had it not been for the poet who interviewed him and wrote it up in such a poetic way. And now it's almost like a Bible, I guess. I mean, people
Sure.
read it, and it inspires them to do good things. And he was a holy man, and he knew Crazy Horse too. And
Sure.
so that was probably the best description of Crazy Horse that anybody had. And I can't remember another one that was better than that. He spoke of him in there. So yeah, he inspired me in a number of ways too. And I always wanted to find that flower that he dropped down north of Manderson on Grass Creek.
Right.
I always thought about that because I collect plants, and so I think I know what it is. But I've read things by scientists who have tried to guess what it was, and they had all these scientific terms, and about what it is. And to me, it seemed like they were way off base. And, it might have just been his own medicine, but I think I know what it is. And so this guy by the name of, well, I shouldn't give his name, I guess, but we always planned to go out there and search that out, and because he lived in Manderson, and but he died, and we didn't get a chance to do it together. So
Sure. And we shared earlier in our conversation that in the Catholic Church, Chief Black Elk, Nicholas Black Elk, is up for canonization, and is up it's to the Vatican now, and so hopefully very soon he'll become our second Native American saint. Tekakwitha.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Tekakwitha is the first.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's Mohawk tribe, kind of border between New York and Canada.
Yeah.
And I think both countries share her
Yeah.
in that honor. And so, this is a beautiful time to come together to unite. We're living, folks, this pandemic is going on, this COVID pandemic. And so we're living at a time now where I believe the Creator is making good out of this by detoxing our planet.
Yeah.
And making it healthier for us in all aspects, mind, body, spirit, and reclaiming what He gave us.
Yeah. This isn't a new thing for us, though, if you recall. Millions of people died during World War I.
Right.
And that was over in, I think, 1918, I believe it was.
The Spanish flu.
That was the time when the Spanish flu hit.
Right.
So after losing millions of people by the war,
Right.
and then we lost all those millions of people by the Spanish flu all
Right.
over the world.
Right.
And these are things that are going to happen to us from time to time, and there's a reason for them. Maybe we just need to thin out our population every now and then.
And so getting to resiliency, we talked about the beautiful medicine wheel, bringing everything together, mind, body, spirit, and living that way. And 90% of our physical, mental, and emotional problems come from wounds in our spirit. And so how do you, Richard, and how Lakota traditional, how do you increase your resiliency?
I'm really not traditional like some people are. 100%.
Sure.
Like I mentioned to you earlier, that my parents were the last generation that were conversant in Lakota language, and although we knew a lot of the words that came from that, we heard them talking and everything.
Sure.
And so I guess you couldn't say that I'm really traditional. I don't practice some of the things that other people do. But yet, I know about plants, and that's a whole language unto itself. And so, people want to, I'll teach them about that. And when I was younger, I was giving a talk about plants, and an elder said, don't forget to mention that that plant has a spirit, and that spirit interacts with your own spirit, and he thought I missed that point, so.
Sure.
So I brought that out in my next speaking engagements anyway.
Richard just reminds me that we all have gifts and talents. And so what Richard's doing is sharing those gifts and talents. And so we're going to try to market that and get people out into the environment, the fresh air, getting exercise, learning about nutrition, nutritional plants, medicinal plants. And so to be able to augment the food supply, because to your point, we may need to.
Yeah.
And it's what the Creator gave us. It's another way the Creator is giving back to us.
Yeah. Well, if we weren't resilient, we would not have lasted this long, because
Good point.
we have to meet whatever is out, whatever happens, we have to meet it and then decide how to deal with it, you know, and
That's true.
still remain alive at the
Right.
end of it. And so,
Right.
same with this. I mean, we have to get through this somehow. And,
Beautiful. Beautiful. Folks, we appreciate you being with us today. And, you know, Richard talked about the sage to purge the evil. And so we have a few gifts for my Kola, my friend, and Kola is friend in
Yeah.
Lakota.
Mhm.
Okay? And so, and what we then will bring in the good spirits is the sweetgrass.
yeah.
Is that
Thank you very
what
much.
we would do? Okay. And so, and then Richard drives the exact same car that I do, the Subaru, and I have one of these stickers on the back of mine, Unite All in Love, for God is Love, the Creator. And so, there might be two running around Rapid City, who knows? Okay? And so, and a card to thank him for his friendship and for what he does for his people and really for the world, you know, how food is medicine. And then one of my favorite chiefs is Red Cloud, okay? And he says, I am poor and naked, the chief of this nation. We do not want your riches. We cannot take your riches to the other world. All we want to do is teach our children to do right, okay? All we want is peace and love, you know? And so, beautiful culture, the 12 Lakota virtues, the foundational virtue is love, beautiful code of ethics, all to inspire us to honor and to love the Creator. And so, and that's uniting all people together, unite all in love, for the Creator is love. And so, just a few tokens of my appreciation for my friend and the time we spend together in the great outdoors, learning from him. And so, stay tuned, folks. You live in the Rapid City area. June, Richard wants to take us out into the hills, Wind Cave, and learn a lot more. And so, I appreciate his time and the camaraderie we had today, and we ate some rainbow trout out of Spring Creek. How was the food, Richard?
Very good. It was excellent. Yeah.
Now, his nephew is a world-renowned chef, so didn't come to that caliber, but it was edible, huh, Richard?
More than that.
More than that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's always beautiful to have a sense of humor, and so thank you very much for the privilege of your time today, Richard, and folks, for you watching, and many blessings on your spiritual journey, and we'll see you next time. Many blessings with much love. Have a great evening, folks. Bye.